Bruce Gullick wasn't looking for a story. He was looking at a house he needed to renovate. That's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about how this detail surfaced. Not through an investigation, not through a subpoena, not through journalists requesting records or prosecutors presenting evidence to a grand jury. Through a man who bought a property, walked in to start working on it, and found something he wasn't expecting. He found children's clothes in the attic, stuffed away, like someone had been living up there. And when he described the rest of what he found inside that house, the odor, the condition of the walls and floors, what had been left behind, the descriptions were almost identical to what Ohio investigators reported finding at 182 Ohmer Road in Hamden on June 30th, 2026. Almost identical. Which means, and this is the part that I think deserves much more attention than it's getting, that what was found in Hamden may not have started in Hamden. The Siders family lived in that Gallia County house near Cheshire before they moved to Vinton County. Birth records obtained by ABC6 in Columbus show members of the family were living at that Gallia County address between 2020 and 2024. They moved, they left. And whatever they left behind in that house, the clothing in the attic, the condition of the property, the evidence that people had been living in spaces not designed to be lived in, sat there, waiting. Until a new owner bought the house and a man named Bruce Gullick walked in to start renovating it. He talked to WSYX. He said it was pretty rough inside. He said there were a lot of kids' clothes in the attic, stuffed away, like someone was living up there. He described an overwhelming odor that was difficult to tolerate. A neighbor named Melissa Edmonds, who lives just down the street from that Gallia County property, said she didn't realize the Siders family had even moved out for quite a while. She described the house as kind of just an empty house, left a mess, not in great condition. She said she never saw the children, although her nephew had apparently played with some of them one summer, possibly 2021 or 2022. Brief contact, outdoor contact. The kind of brief, seasonal neighborhood interaction that doesn't reveal anything about what's happening inside a house. That detail, a nephew who played with some of the children one summer and then they were gone, is the kind of thing that I think is easy to read past when you're moving quickly through a story like this. But I want to stop on it for a second, because it's a window, a small one, into what those children's lives looked like from the outside. Kids who played with a neighbor's nephew for a summer. Kids who were visible enough at that point in time, at that specific property, that someone in the neighborhood knew they existed. And then the family moved, and nobody saw them again until June 30th, 2026. Now, I want to be careful about what this Gallia County property tells us and what it doesn't. What it tells us is that the conditions investigators documented in Hamden, the kind of conditions that Ohio Attorney General Andy Wilson called extraordinarily serious, that Vinton County Sheriff Ryan Kane described as unlike anything in his career. Those conditions existed at a prior residence as well. The descriptions match. The attic clothing, the odor, the state of the property. What it doesn't tell us is exactly what was happening at that property during those years. Investigators are still building that picture. The investigation has been confirmed to extend beyond Vinton County. Former Vinton County prosecutor Aaron Payne said publicly that the scope of the case reaches across county lines and potentially state lines. The Gallia County property is part of that expanded investigation. Whether anything that happened at the Gallia County property becomes part of the criminal charges, whether the grand jury that will eventually consider this case hears evidence about what occurred there as well as what occurred in Hamden, is something that will become clearer as the investigation continues. But the fact that a man renovating a house found children's clothes in the attic, and the fact that the conditions he described matched the conditions that ultimately led to 4 arrests and 16 counts of child endangerment per defendant. That's not nothing. Let me back up and give you the full geographic picture of this family's movements, because I think it matters for understanding how a situation of this scale went undetected for so long across multiple jurisdictions. Birth records obtained by ABC6 and reviewed by the Columbus Dispatch trace members of the Siders family across at least 5 different addresses in Ohio before the June 30th discovery. There's the Gallia County house near Cheshire, the one Bruce Gullick is now renovating, the one where neighbor Melissa Edmonds didn't notice them leave for quite a while. There's a property on Garfield Avenue in Gallipolis. Records show the family may have lived there briefly in 2019 before moving to the Cheshire house. There's a third address in Gallipolis from 2008, where, according to records, Elizabeth and Gary Jr. were living when the first of the children was born. A property surrounded by mobile homes in a modest part of the city. There's a property on Poplar Church Road in Bidwell. The family appears to have lived there for several years, at least from 2009 to 2014. And then there's the Vinton County house on Ohmer Road in Hamden, where everything came to light. 5 addresses, multiple Ohio counties, approximately 18 years of movement that investigators believe was largely conducted outside of institutional records. And at each of those addresses, the investigation is now presumably asking the same question it's asking about the Gallia County house. What was the condition of the property? Who saw anything? What records exist from those years and those locations? The neighbor who spoke to the reporter covering the Gallia County house said he remembered the family. He said he thought there were about 9 children. This would have been around 2020 or 2021. He said the family kept to themselves. He saw some of them outside occasionally, but mostly they just stayed inside. 9 children. The neighbor thought there were 9. There were more. And he saw them outside sometimes, which means at that specific property, at that specific point in time, some degree of outdoor visibility existed. But the family kept to themselves, and nobody went looking any closer. There's a detail in the Gallia County story that I find significant beyond just the condition of the house. The truancy case. Let me explain the Gallia County truancy connection specifically, because it's different from the one I covered in the previous video. 6 truancy complaints were filed in Gallia County Juvenile Court against Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders for failing to send the children to school. Those cases were closed, not because someone investigated and found an explanation, not because a judge reviewed the situation, because the family could not be located and the court documents couldn't be served to them. Couldn't be located. A family with 6 children enrolled in a local school, enrolled enough that truancy complaints were filed, became unlocalizable in the middle of a legal process, and the cases closed. And then the family turned up in Vinton County, and eventually a misdemeanor warrant for Gary Jr. brought investigators to Ohmer Road in Hamden, and 16 individuals were found in conditions that the Ohio Attorney General described as extraordinarily serious. The truancy cases in Gallia County, the truancy case in Ohio that I covered previously, the attic in the Gallia County house, the conditions that Gullick described, the neighbor who thought there were 9 and saw them occasionally, the cases that closed because the family couldn't be served. Each of those is a thread, a separate thread, but they all come from the same spool. Let me talk now about the prosecutor's update to county commissioners. Because this happened on July 14th, and it's the most significant public statement William Archer has made since the initial press conferences after the June 30th discovery. Archer appeared before the Vinton County Board of Commissioners at their regular meeting. He requested an additional $20,000 to help cover the costs of the Siders case. Not the entire budget, an additional $20,000. He was clear that if the money wasn't spent, it would be returned. He was asking for a dedicated line item because the scope of the case, the criminal proceedings, the children's services cases, the investigation, the grand jury preparation, was exceeding what his office's normal budget could absorb. And then he said something that I think represents the most significant public confirmation of where this case is headed. He said the county is asking for permanent custody of all 16. Permanent. Not temporary, not transitional, permanent custody. Which means Vinton County's legal position, the position Archer articulated to the county commissioners, is that the Siders family should never regain custody of the 16 individuals who were removed from that property on June 30th. Let me be clear about what permanent custody means and doesn't mean in this context. It's a legal status that applies to the children's services proceedings, a separate track from the criminal case. The criminal case is about what Gary Jr., Elizabeth, Gary Sr., and Christina are charged with under Ohio law. The Children's Services case is about the legal relationship between those 16 individuals and the adults who had been caring for them. Seeking permanent custody doesn't mean the criminal case is resolved. It doesn't mean anyone has been convicted. It means that, from a Children's Services standpoint, the county's legal position is that these 16 individuals should not be returned to the care of the people who are now charged with their endangerment. That's a significant legal and human statement, and Archer made it publicly in an open meeting on July 14th. All 16 individuals are now out of the hospital and in therapeutic foster care. That was confirmed publicly this week. Therapeutic foster care is a specialized form of placement, not a standard foster home, but a placement designed specifically for individuals who have experienced significant trauma and who need specialized support and therapeutic services as part of their daily care. The South Central Ohio Job and Family Services posted publicly a list of items that people can donate for the 16 individuals. The list included toys, art supplies, learning materials for a range of ages and developmental stages, sensory items for the youngest, and those with developmental needs. The agency said they would not be releasing specific clothing or shoe sizes to protect privacy. That donation list, the breadth of it, the range of ages and developmental needs it implies, is one of the clearest public pictures of the diversity of the 16 individuals' ages and needs without identifying any of them specifically. It tells you that this group of people spans a very wide developmental range, from the very youngest to teenagers, and that the care they need is correspondingly complex and varied. The Ohio Department of Children and Youth confirmed that the county was granted temporary custody of the 16 and that they remain in that custody. Vinton County is now seeking to make that permanent. Elizabeth Sider's bond request, her motion seeking release from the $300,000 bond on the grounds that the individuals are no longer under her care, is still pending before the court. The fact that the county is simultaneously seeking permanent custody of those same 16 individuals creates a significant tension with Elizabeth's stated goal of eventual reunification. Her attorney, Tommy Stolley, has been careful to frame reunification as a long-term goal rather than an immediate request. But the permanent custody motion suggests that even the long-term path to reunification may be legally blocked. Let me talk about Gary Siders Jr.'s case, because there's an update here too. His hearing on the 4 public indecency charges, the charges that led directly to the warrant that led directly to June 30th, was scheduled for July 23rd. That date came and went. His attorney asked for a continuance. The hearing has been rescheduled to August 13th. This is the second postponement of this specific hearing. It was originally scheduled for July 9th, moved to July 23rd, and now moved again to August 13th. Former Ohio prosecutor Mark Pete Meyer, speaking on the Crime Fix podcast, offered an analysis of what this pattern of continuances might mean. He suggested that Gary Jr.'s attorney is likely trying to coordinate the timing of the misdemeanor indecency case with the broader criminal case. Moving slowly on the misdemeanor, which involves the same warrant, the same incident, the same investigators, may be a strategy to avoid creating a record in the smaller case that could be used against him in the larger child endangerment case. That's an attorney doing attorney things. It's not illegal. It's not inherently suspicious. Defense attorneys delay when delay serves their clients. But it's worth understanding why these continuances keep happening and what they might be designed to achieve. The grand jury for the child endangerment charges has still not been convened. Prosecutor Archer told the county commissioners that he was meeting with the special prosecutor, Kara Keating, on the same day as the commissioners' meeting to discuss the case. He said the investigation has a life of its own. That phrase stuck with me. A life of its own. Because that's exactly what this case has become. A criminal case that started with a misdemeanor warrant, that expanded into 16 counts of felony child endangerment per defendant. That now involves investigations into prior residences in multiple counties, a Gallia County house with children's clothing in the attic, truancy cases in 2 counties that both closed without resolution, a permanent custody request for 16 individuals, a computer crime section of the Attorney General's office reportedly involved in the investigation. An investigation that former prosecutors believe may take months, possibly years, to fully work through a life of its own. There's something else from the commissioners' meeting that I want to mention. Archer referenced the possibility of doing something about the house and the people who are trespassing into it. The Ohmer Road property. People are going there. Investigators are concerned about it. Whether that means people are going to look, to document, to take photographs, or something else. Archer didn't specify, but it's significant enough that he mentioned it to the county commissioners as one of the things his office may need to address. Think about the photographs that Tommy Stolley, Elizabeth's attorney, raised questions about. He went to the prosecutor and confirmed that no photographs or videos had been officially released, and yet photographs and videos have been circulating online. The trespassing concern Archer mentioned may be directly connected to how those images got out. If people are going to the Ohmer Road property and documenting what they find there, those images are not being generated by law enforcement. They're being generated by civilians accessing an active investigation site. And the chain of custody concerns that creates, the questions about authenticity and context and what those images actually show versus what might be assumed about them, are real legal concerns for a prosecution that will eventually have to present evidence in court. Archer is paying attention to that. He has to be. Now, let me come back to the Gallia County house, because I started with Bruce Gullick and I want to end with what his discovery actually means for the investigation. He walked into a house he was renovating. He found clothing in the attic stuffed away like someone was living up there. He found conditions that matched what investigators described in Hamden. He wasn't a law enforcement officer. He wasn't a welfare investigator. He was a man doing renovation work on a property someone else had just purchased. And he found evidence that the conditions documented in Hamden may not have been unique to Hamden, that they traveled with the family, that they existed at a prior address, that the pattern started before the Vinton County chapter of this story began. Investigators already knew the family had lived in multiple locations. The investigation was already described as extending beyond Vinton County. But Gullick's account, the specific detail of the attic, the clothing, the conditions, adds a layer of material evidence to what was previously a documented pattern of movement. Because it's one thing to know a family lived somewhere before. It's another thing to have a specific person with a specific name who walked into a specific property and described specific things he found there that correlate directly with the conditions that led to charges in a different county. That's the difference between a documented pattern and corroborated evidence. And that's why the Gallia County house matters. The investigation is ongoing. The grand jury has not yet convened. No indictments have been issued. All 4 defendants have pleaded not guilty. Additional charges remain possible as the investigation continues. The Children's Services case is proceeding separately from the criminal case, and Vinton County is seeking permanent custody of all 16 individuals who were removed from 182 Ohmer Road on June 30th. Those 16 individuals are in therapeutic foster care. They're receiving specialized support. The South Central Ohio Job and Family Services is accepting donations for their care. The process of helping them is long and complicated and will require sustained attention from people who are trained for exactly this kind of work. But it has started. And somewhere in Gallia County, on a property near Cheshire, a man named Bruce Gullick is renovating a house. And in the attic of that house, he found children's clothes stuffed away like someone was living up there. He wasn't looking for a story. He just found one. If you want to follow this case as the investigation expands and the grand jury proceedings develop, subscribe to Crime Uncovered. We'll be here for every verified development. The Gallia County investigation, the grand jury, the permanent custody decision, and everything else this case still has to reveal. The records are there. The houses are there, and investigators are now working through all of it.